Hello, and welcome to the first lesson in our landscape photography course. I'm Sue Bishop, and this week we'll start our journey into the joys of landscape photography by looking at the decision of what to include in or exclude from your image. Any photograph that we take is a selection from the elements on offer in the scene before us. Even if we take a picture that includes almost everything, we still have to make a decision about where to put the edges. And many photos will involve a greater degree of selectivity. We may pick out just one small element from the landscape for our image. There are two aspects to all of this: the creative decision about what to include or exclude, and the technical decision about how to achieve this. This second decision will usually involve choosing which focal length lens to use. This will apply not only to cameras with interchangeable lenses, but also to compact cameras, most of which have a zoom lens. So we'll start by looking at the way in which the different focal lengths affect the way your image appears. A wide-angle lens does as its name suggests. In other words, it includes a wide angle of view, not only to the right and left of you, but also of the sky above and the foreground at your feet. Wide-angle lenses are great for emphasizing the feeling of space in an open landscape, and also for including as much of the scene as possible when you're working in tighter spaces. Let's have a look now at a few photos making use of a wide-angle lens. A couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to trek the Annapurna circuit in the Himalayas. One morning towards the end of the trek, I got up at 4:30 and walked for an hour through the pre-dawn dark to the top of a hill which is well known as a place for viewing sunrises. As the sun rose and the first rays touched the tops of the peaks, I had to decide whether to zoom in on just one or two of the mountain tops, or whether to include the whole panorama. I decided to use a wide-angle lens in order to include as much of the width of the Annapurna range as possible. Wide-angle lenses exaggerate the perspective in a scene and increase the sense of depth from front to back, as well as emphasizing elements which are close to the camera and pushing distant elements further away. This photo was taken in Texas, and I chose a wide-angle lens to emphasize the sense of space and the way the dirt road, with its borders of wildflowers and mesquite trees, seemed to lead on into infinity. The wide-angle lens has also made the most of the lovely sky. As I mentioned, a wide-angle lens can include a lot of both foreground and sky in your image. For this photo, taken in Namibia, I wanted to emphasize the patterns in the dry, cracked earth, so I crouched down and took the photo from a low viewpoint with a wide-angle lens. This has exaggerated the foreground and made it appear even more dramatic than it did to the eye. This is an important thing to remember about wide-angle lenses. They will exaggerate and make the most of an interesting foreground or a dramatic sky, but be careful if you use a wide-angle lens that you do have something interesting in your foreground or your sky. If the foreground is just an area of grass or earth, or the sky is bland, you'll have large areas in the resulting image without any information in them. I rather enjoy this photo because it shows the visual tricks that a wide-angle lens can play. At first glance, I think you would say that this is a photo of a mountain reflected in a lake. But in fact, the water in the photo is only a shallow puddle, no more than a couple of inches deep. By lying down on the ground with my camera only just above the surface of the water and using a wide-angle lens, I was able to emphasize the reflection and make it look much more dramatic than it did to the eye from standing height. Incidentally, I also got extremely wet.